Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller TV series named Styx. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins with a man waking up by the sea and immediately sensing something was wrong. There was a large hole in the palm of his hand, clearly the result of a gunshot. But strangely enough, the wound neither hurt nor itched, and even the glaring light passing through the hole caused no sensation. At this point, the man was only slightly panicked, unaware that something even more bizarre was about to unfold. When he returned home and examined himself in the mirror, he noticed a circular hole in his shirt. Realizing what this meant, he quickly tore open his shirt to inspect it. Sure enough, there was a dark, gaping bullet hole in his hairy chest, identical to the one in his dirty hand. For a moment, the man felt his scalp tingle with fear. Looking at his pale face in the mirror, he wondered whether he was alive or dead. He didn't waste any time, rushing to the hospital in a panic, begging the nurse to find him a decent doctor. Following the procedure, he had to register first, but hadn't brought any identification. As they were arguing, a doctor from behind called out his name, Styx. It turned out this doctor had once been his father's primary physician. Seeing Styx's frantic state, the doctor didn't ask many questions, merely nodding to the nurse and offering to take over. The two of them went into a room where Styx hurriedly showed the doctor the wounds on his hand and hairy chest. The doctor was dumbfounded by the sight. Such severe injuries should not be survivable. Then, a more alarming moment occurred. The heart monitor displayed a flat line, indicating that Styx had no heartbeat at all. Styx's head seemed to explode. He was clearly alive and well. He immediately accused the machine of malfunctioning, but the doctor simply admitted he couldn't provide an explanation. Next, the doctor prepared to take tissue samples from the area surrounding Styx's wounds. Whether Styx was dead or alive, this was worth investigating. However, this enraged Styx, who cursed angrily and stormed out of the hospital. Upon arriving home, his once adoring dog suddenly barked at him furiously as if he were an unwelcome stranger. At that moment, Styx felt something moving inside his body, though the sensation was fleeting. After inspecting himself in the mirror again, he grabbed a pair of tweezers and inserted them into the bullet hole. As expected, he retrieved a bullet. He patched himself up and began to recall everything that had happened the previous night. It turns out Styx was a police officer. The night before, he had arranged to meet a petty smuggler by the river who welcomed him with his messy beard. The bearded smuggler had offered him some bribes and asked if there would be any surprise inspections soon. Styx accepted the money and reassured him. Not long after they parted ways, Styx spotted a figure not far off. In the darkness, it seemed like someone was strangling another person. He cautiously approached and shouted in a chicken voice. Hearing the chicken noise, the man fled for his shitty life. Styx pursued him, only to find that the man lying on the ground was already dead like a piece of soap. With no time to lose, he continued the chase until they reached the end of the bridge. The man had no choice but to hide behind a pillar. As Styx closed in, he tried to outmaneuver him, but in the next instant, he was shot by a masked figure. After Styx had been thrown into the sea, a sudden ringtone jolted him from his memories. It was the doctor on the phone, his tone urgent as he begged Styx to cooperate with his research, promising complete confidentiality. Without a second thought, Styx hung up. He immediately called his colleagues, reporting the murder he had witnessed the night before. But when everyone arrived at the scene, they found no body and no signs of anything unusual. His colleagues even began to suspect that Styx, known for being a drunkard, was just rambling, smelly nonsense. After all, if he had really seen the victim and the masked man, why hadn't he called for backup right away? Styx tried to explain what he had seen, but didn't realize that as his anger quietly rose, he was losing control of himself. His face even began to contort, growing more and more grotesque. Thankfully, this change lasted only a moment, and the sound of his colleagues calling out brought him back to his senses. Trying to appear calm, Styx walked alone to the other side of the bridge. When no one was looking, he took the bullet he had pulled from his chest and slipped it into a crack in the railing. Then he called his colleagues over, claiming to have found something. Since no one believed him, he had no choice but to fabricate evidence this way. Feeling a bit frustrated, Styx returned home. The series of bizarre events from the morning had left him physically and mentally exhausted. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him just how starving he was. However, when his wife served up a table full of food, an even stranger scene unfolded. Without saying a word, Styx eagerly stuffed the food into his mouth, chewing with the crude, wild manners of a mad cow. He even ended up lifting the entire pot. but after gulping down the last sip of water, he suddenly vomited all the food he had just eaten. His son's angry outburst brought Styx back to his senses again. His earlier behavior had terrified his family, and he himself realized something was deeply wrong. Styx decided to sleep in the living room that night. His sweet little daughter, thinking her father was just sick, didn't expect what came next. As Styx hugged her, a sudden surge of dark energy swelled inside him, and his face twisted grotesquely once more. His arms tightened around her in an iron grip. Only the sound of her terrified screams brought him back to his senses. He quickly told his daughter not to tell her mother and urged her to go to bed. Afterward, Styx rushed to find the doctor. He explained that in the moment he hugged his daughter, he felt as though a wild beast inside him was trying to take over his body. He needed to know what was happening to him. But to his surprise, the doctor wasn't shocked at all. After a long pause, the doctor finally spoke. He said that Styx's condition had deteriorated to the point where it was no longer safe to return to the hospital. If word got out, everyone who knew about this would want to study him, and he would become nothing more than a lab rat. Therefore, Styx had to keep this a secret. He claimed he had a solution and led Styx to an underground lab, hidden from sight. Here, the doctor intended to figure out what was going on, but in his careful manner, he insisted on observing Styx for 24 hours. Although this would restrict Styx's freedom, it would also ensure his safety. After thinking for just a second, Styx flatly refused. Whether he became a lab rat for one person or for many didn't make much difference to him. The doctor tried to stop him, but Styx suddenly received a call. It was a girl he knew, frantically crying for help before the line went dead. Without hesitation, Styx rushed to her brothel. The moment he stepped inside, he saw the woman named Lena lying on the floor. It was clear she had overdosed. Styx quickly poured her a glass of water, but before he could help, a man sprang out from behind him. It was Gino, the bearded smuggler Styx had met the previous night. Apparently, the police had just raided the port and arrested the refugees they had smuggled in. Gino himself had barely escaped. Styx had told him the previous night that there wouldn't be any inspections, which was why they had decided to come ashore tonight. Furious, Gino knew their boss wouldn't spare him after this. Without warning, he pulled out a small knife and stabbed Styx in the side. In that instant, the scent of diabetic blood filled the air, and the beast inside Styx fully awakened. In the blink of an eye, he transformed, grabbing Gino's arm but sparing his messy beard, before sinking his unbrushed teeth into it and tearing off a large chunk of flesh. He retreated to the corner, chewing furiously. By now, there was nothing left of his human appearance. Gino, terrified, fled the scene with his messy beard. Moments later, Styx returned to his normal self, barely pausing before stumbling out of the brothel. The next morning, Styx returned to the beach where he had woken up the day before, hoping to find some clues. Suddenly, an intense itch spread across his hand. He hurriedly unwrapped the bandage and was shocked to find that the bullet hole in his palm had mysteriously healed. Aside from a faint scar, there was no longer any sign of the injury. Styx couldn't help but laugh. Maybe this nightmarish ordeal was finally coming to an end. But unbeknownst to him that night, the masked man appeared once again. He quietly whispered into the ear of an old man as he slept, then stood up and placed a mysterious device inside the chandelier before leaving and returning to his car. When he removed his mask, it was unexpectedly the doctor. It's still unclear what sinister plot he's scheming. Meanwhile, Styx made a horrifying discovery. Maggots were crawling out of the wound on his chest, a clear sign that his body had begun to decay. This revelation left Styx paralyzed with fear. He had no choice but to seek an emergency examination from the doctor who knew the truth. Just yesterday, the wound had shown signs of healing, so what on earth was happening now? As the doctor took samples from the tissue around the bullet hole, Styx's stomach growled loudly again. Driven by hunger, he bared his teeth at the doctor. Thankfully, the urge passed as quickly as it came, and Styx returned to normal. The doctor, unaware of how close he had come to being Styx's next meal, simply mentioned that more observation was needed in a controlled environment. The doctor then handed Styx a bottle of deodorizer. Apparently, his body had already begun to emit a foul odor from the decay. Styx suddenly remembered his wife's disgusted expression earlier that morning. It was only then that he realized he had lost his sense of smell. The doctor advised him to stay in a cold environment, which might slow down the decay process. The observation results revealed that while Styx's brain was still functioning, something was devouring the energy within his cells. Once a cell dies, the brain instinctively eliminates what it deems unnecessary functions, including motor skills and sensory abilities. At this point, Styx couldn't fully grasp the importance of consciousness. His only concern was whether he would slowly die. The doctor then suggested that Styx stay and participate in his research, explaining that it would be immensely valuable both to science and the future of humanity. But Styx had no desire to take on this noble responsibility. All he wanted was to return to normal as soon as possible. And as things stood, the only person who might have the answers was the masked man who shot him. Little did Styx know that man was the doctor himself. After a brief farewell, Styx hurried off. No sooner had Styx left than the doctor pulled out a frozen tissue sample and began his research. He recorded his findings into the computer. Styx thinks that his gunshot caused his transformation, but that's not true. The bullet definitely killed him, but what exactly brought him back as a living dead man? He hopes the samples will provide answers. But it turned out that the doctor didn't fully know the truth either. He then pulled back a curtain to reveal a massive tank behind him, and inside floated the corpse of the man Styx had witnessed the masked man kill that night. The doctor resumed his experiments and soon discovered traces of a virus in Styx's tissue sample. Meanwhile, Styx returned to the police station, hoping his colleagues would investigate the murder by the masked man and track down the one who had shot him. However, it was clear that none of his colleagues believed the crime had ever happened. They found nothing at the scene and suspected that Styx, notorious for his heavy drinking, had hallucinated the entire thing. Some even speculated that Styx had shot himself in the hand, and the bullet he had hidden in the railing proved nothing. This infuriated Styx. His colleagues clearly saw him as a washed-up drunk. In frustration, he demanded to know why he hadn't been informed about the raid on the human trafficking operation that night. His superior, visibly annoyed, asked him to prove his worth. In front of him lay the case files from the smuggling operation. The police had arrested a large number of people but had gotten nowhere with the interrogations. Styx, being connected to some of the suspects, naturally knew a few things. In a bid to regain his superior's respect, he pointed them toward a key figure in the case. But on his way home, Styx witnessed something that pained him even more. His wife was being far too close with another man. As it turned out, she had filed for divorce a long time ago because of Styx's chronic drinking problem. She had only stayed with him to take care of his ailing father. When Styx got home, he secretly checked his wife's phone, and sure enough, she had been in frequent contact with the stranger. Just then, his son came home, and Styx quickly pocketed the phone. The atmosphere that night was awkward, with Styx at a loss for words. Despite the table full of food, he felt no appetite, even though he was starving. He chalked it up to the string of upsetting events he had endured, completely unaware that ordinary food could no longer satisfy him, that he no longer craved it at all. Late at night, Styx found himself eerily standing behind his wife, his stomach growling with hunger. Fortunately, he managed to control himself just in time. Suddenly, he felt something strange in his hand again. Hastily, he unwrapped the bandage and was shocked to see that the wound, which had healed, was now decaying once more. He decided to sleep in the garage alone, but as he turned his head, he noticed the fridge nearby. The doctor's words about how cold environments could slow down the decay flashed through his mind, so he simply climbed into the fridge and slept there. It wasn't until the next morning, after his family had left the house, that he crawled out. His stomach growled again. Since biting Gino's arm 2 nights ago, he hadn't eaten anything. Just as he was about to head back to the garage, a man suddenly attacked him from behind. As his emotions surged, Styx's face began to change. He slammed the garage door shut, and in the next moment, his consciousness was consumed by the ravenous beast within, causing him to attack the man without hormone mercy. When Styx regained his senses, he found himself covered in blood, and the gruesome scene before him left him in shock. Instinctively, he screamed for help and even attempted CPR on the mutilated body. But after a few moments, he realized it was too late. Panicked, he began to clean up the scene and washed the blood from his body. He wrapped the man's remains in plastic bags and stuffed them into the trunk of his car. Just as he was about to leave, his colleague, Joe, suddenly appeared at the door, scaring Styx out of his turds. Luckily, Joe didn't notice anything unusual and had only come to ask Styx to join him in investigating the smuggling case. They needed to track the wife of the crime boss they had arrested, as she was bound to contact her husband's associates. Relieved, Styx agreed. Before long, the woman did indeed meet with a man, and Joe quickly snapped photos as evidence. But just then, a noise came from Styx's trunk. Alarmed, Styx opened the trunk to check, only to find that the man who should have been dead had come back to life. It was clear that he had become the same kind of being as Styx. Without thinking, Styx grabbed a fire extinguisher and smashed it down on the man. After taking care of things, Joe returned, none the wiser to the bizarre events. As they drove away, the muffled knocking from the trunk resumed. Desperately trying to come up with a solution, Styx slammed on the brakes. He told Joe to get out and check the trunk. As Joe walked toward it, about to uncover Styx's secret, Styx floored the gas pedal and sped away, leaving Joe behind. He drove to a deserted dock and, under the cover of night, opened the trunk once more. Styx demanded to know who the man was. The man revealed that he had been hired by a masked man to kidnap Styx and bring him back. Styx was stunned, realizing that the masked man he had been searching for was also looking for him. Meanwhile, the doctor received a message from the kidnapper, claiming the job was done and arranging a meeting later that night on a boat, as per the plan. Styx waited anxiously on the Tesla boat, expecting the masked man to show up. But the doctor didn't move. He had already installed surveillance on the boat and knew that Styx was trying to lure him out. What the doctor hadn't anticipated was that Styx would soon discover the cameras and realize that he had been under the masked man's control the entire time. Still unaware that the doctor was the masked man, Styx made a fatal mistake. He delivered himself and the captive directly to the doctor's front door, intending to use the man as a test subject for the doctor's experiments. The man, Andre, who had been bitten, suddenly felt an overwhelming hunger. The doctor prepared a large tray of sandwiches for him, but after devouring them ravenously, Andre vomited everything back up. The doctor rushed to his room to change clothes while his daughter quietly snuck into the underground lab. Seeing this, Andre tried to trick the girl by pretending they were playing a game and asked her to hand him the keys. Although a little scared, the girl was unsuspecting. Just as she passed him the keys, Andre suddenly went wild and tried to grab her hand. Fortunately, the doctor arrived just in time. He tested Andre's reaction by offering his own arm and quickly realized that Andre had an intense craving for human flesh, just like Styx. The doctor revealed that he had discovered traces of a rare virus in the samples, suggesting that Styx's transformation might be linked to it. He asked Styx if he had ever been bitten by a bird or any other animal, but Styx shook his head. However, he did admit to biting Andre. Realizing the danger, the doctor stepped back, worried that Styx might attack him next. But Styx simply took off his shirt to show the doctor his handsome muscles and how his body was changing. The doctor dismissed his muscles, but quickly deduced that whenever Styx bit a human, his wounds would heal. It seemed that the combination of the right food and the virus was what was keeping him alive. This was a groundbreaking discovery in the history of medicine. The doctor immediately collected new blood samples, while Andre, starving and weakened, cursed Styx for turning him into this monstrous state. Desperate, he begged Styx to find him some food and a hot girl. But Styx, still holding on to his humanity, couldn't do it. The guilt over what he had done to Andre weighed heavily on him, and he couldn't bear the thought of creating more victims. After leaving the doctors, Styx sought out his colleague Joe. The day before, Styx had noticed that his wife had grown close to Joe, but he couldn't blame anyone but himself. His years of drinking and neglect had all but destroyed his marriage. Now he had no choice but to work with Joe to investigate the smuggling case. They soon tracked the crime boss's wife to the smuggler's hideout, where the woman seemed to be searching for someone. Not long after, she came back outside, knelt to inspect something on the ground, and then left. Once she was gone, Styx hurried over to see what she had been looking at, discovering a pool of blood. He had no idea what it meant or what was about to happen. Later that night, a woman washing her car alone listened to music, unaware of the lurking danger. Suddenly, there were the sounds of biting and tearing, and when the car reappeared, it was empty, nothing but blood stains inside. The police arrived soon after, puzzled by the scene, as this was the second case of its kind. Styx realized that the spot where he had found the bloodstain earlier was where a similar incident had occurred the previous night. The scene seemed disturbingly familiar. Meanwhile, the missing bodies were stuffed into a wooden crate covered in bite marks before being thrown into a furnace. Overseeing it all was a mysterious man in a hat. Another night passed, and the nutrients Styx had gained from biting Andre had nearly run out. His body was weakening again, and his wounds began to rot and stink once more. If he didn't eat soon, the outcome would be disastrous. Desperate, he resorted to packing ice on his wounds to slow the decay. As hunger struck again, a rat darted by. Styx lunged at it, tearing into the animal with his teeth, but seconds later he vomited it all out. It was clear that this was not what his body needed. Despair began to set in. He wondered if he had really had to become a cannibal to survive. But Styx wasn't the only one suffering. Andre was also on the verge of collapsing from hunger, which only made the doctor more excited. A little later, the doctor appeared outside an elderly woman's window. He was her family doctor, and she had no reason to suspect him. But in the next moment, the doctor smothered her stinky mouth and nose until she passed out. He had found Andre's next meal. However, as the doctor returned home, Styx suddenly arrived, demanding to know what would happen if he refused to feed on others. But as they were about to discuss it further, they discovered Andre barely clinging to life. His dying wish was to return to the sea where he had spent his entire life, and with that, he breathed his last breath. The doctor looked visibly sad, and Styx knew exactly why. The doctor wasn't mourning Andre, he was upset over losing his lab rat. Just then, Styx's phone rang. It was his superior saying that his colleague Joe had suddenly lost contact. Apparently, half an hour ago, a group of refugees who had been arrested managed to escape. They were spotted at the port, likely attempting to flee the area. But when the police arrived, they found all of them dead, and Joe went missing after inspecting the scene. Styx immediately guessed Joe had gone to the smuggler's hideout. Indeed, Joe had already infiltrated the place. After kicking the door open, he found the walls splattered with blood and the body of a notorious smuggler lying dead on the ground. As he bent down to investigate, a man suddenly appeared behind him and knocked him out, wanting to have a baby with him. Shortly after, Styx arrived and in the darkness saw Joe lying unconscious. He rushed over, calling out Joe's name, trying to wake him. Just then, the lights flicked on, and Styx was shocked to see Gino, the bearded smuggler whose arm he had bitten before. It turned out that after Styx had bitten him, a terrified Gino had fled to a bar where he tragically lost his life in a brawl. But when he came back to life, he realized he had changed. Unlike Styx, Gino hadn't held on to his humanity. He now looked stronger and more menacing than ever. The two recent cases where no bodies were found, and the deaths of the escaped refugees, all of that had been Gino's doing. At that moment, the dead smuggler on the floor suddenly stirred, but Gino casually walked over and shot him in the head. He then told Styx that the only way to permanently kill a mutated human was to shoot them in the head, hence the reason for his iron helmet. Gino didn't waste time, proposing that he and Styx work together just like in the old days. Styx would act as his informant in the police station, and in return, Gino would reward him handsomely. Gino boasted that those who used to bully him had already been eaten one by one, and if they teamed up, the entire smuggling operation at the port would be theirs. Without hesitation, Styx refused. He tried to reason with Gino, urging him to stop harming others. Gino, however, tried to tempt Styx, suggesting that he should kill Joe, especially since Joe had taken his wife from him. Overcome with emotion, Styx's hunger began to cloud his mind, and he grabbed Joe by the collar, ready to give in. But in the next second, he turned and attacked Gino instead. Regaining control of himself, Styx fired a shot at Gino, but the bullet bounced off his iron helmet. Gino quickly fled for his life, and once Styx was fully back in his senses, he rushed Joe to the hospital. Fortunately, Joe regained consciousness and was relatively unharmed. When questioned by his superior, Styx gave a brief description of the attacker, but revealed little else. The bodies of the refugees were sent for autopsy, and all of them bore bite marks, along with clear gunshot wounds to the head. Worried that the truth about the mutated humans might be uncovered, Styx quickly suggested that perhaps stray dogs were responsible. But the coroner was certain the bite marks were human. Styx felt a growing unease in his chest. At that moment, Joe pointed out something strange. When they had found the bodies, none of them had gunshot wounds to the head. They wondered why the killer went through the trouble of shooting them after they were already dead. It seems that they were getting closer to the truth. The superior ordered all real information to be sealed and announced that the port would undergo a full investigation. Before the port was shut down, Styx fulfilled his promise to Andre. He sailed Andre's boat to the middle of the sea, tied a heavy iron block to his body, and dropped him into the depths, fulfilling his dying wish. But Styx couldn't rest. The decay of his wounds was accelerating, and even his vision was starting to blur. Things were getting worse by the minute. The next morning, while chatting with his wife, Styx almost lost control when he got too close to her. The sudden shift terrified him, and he realized that he was losing his ability to control himself. Desperate, he rushed to the docks to meet up with Joe, who was on patrol. At first, Styx tried to remain calm around his rival, but Joe had started to grow suspicious. He found it odd that Styx had been so vague when describing the killer, and he began to suspect that Styx didn't really want to catch the culprit. This made Styx both angry and ashamed, and the two started to argue fiercely. In a fit of rage, Joe slammed Styx against a wall. Just then, Styx's stomach let out a loud growl, and he realized he was about to lose control. He punched Joe to the ground and fled the scene as quickly as he could. Joe quickly got up and started looking for Styx, only to find him crouching in the neighboring hallway. Fortunately, Joe hadn't seen Styx's outburst earlier, and Styx felt a wave of relief as he hurried to his feet. He wasn't sure how much longer he could hold out and could only hope that the doctor would find a solution soon. Meanwhile, the doctor was facing a dilemma. His only research subject, Andre, was dead, but the elderly woman he had kidnapped wasn't going to be wasted. He hatched a new plan, deciding to use her as his next experiment. After recording his observations, he gagged her stinky mouth. However, by the time he had isolated the virus, he found that the elderly woman had already passed away, leaving the doctor disappointed. Refusing to let his efforts go to waste, he repurposed her body for another experiment. She, too, was submerged in the large tank, and the previous body had mysteriously disappeared. The doctor spent the next few days obsessing over finding a new test subject. During a conversation with his wife, he unexpectedly got a lead. She mentioned seeing a young boy begging on the street who claimed to be new in town, with no family or friends, and all alone. The doctor thought quickly and suggested she bring the boy home under the pretense of wanting to help him. That evening, the boy was immensely grateful to the doctor and his family as they sat down for dinner, but the doctor began asking him strange questions, inquiring about his medical history and overall health. Though the boy found the doctor's questions odd, he answered out of gratitude for their hospitality. After confirming the boy was in good health, the doctor poured him a glass of wine. Not long after drinking it, the boy began feeling weak and exhausted. The doctor quickly sent his wife and daughter to bed, offering to take care of the boy himself. The doctor then dragged the boy into a room. Meanwhile, Styx was dealing with a different problem. His son had recently developed a habit of stealing, which infuriated him, but when confronted, his son lashed out in anger, accusing Styx of neglecting his responsibilities as a father for years. He even wished for his mother's new partner to move in. The comment enraged Styx, and the terrifying transformation happened instantly. He grabbed his son by the throat and pinned him against the wall, while his wife screamed in terror behind them. Once Styx snapped out of it, he quickly fled the house. Around the same time, the masked man's presence began to resurface. The dead man was placed as a security guard in a building's lobby, and 5 days passed without anyone noticing anything unusual. It wasn't until a young woman had trouble with her key card and sought help from the guard that something seemed off. While he looked healthy, with rosy skin and elasticity, he had no signs of life. The girl quickly called the police, and the security guard's body was brought to the station. Everyone was stunned by the lifelike appearance of the corpse, but when the lead detective saw the shoes on the body, her expression changed. She suddenly remembered the case Styx had reported a few days earlier. He had described the killer as wearing an orange pair of sneakers and a mask, and how the man had shot through his hand. When they went to Styx's house, however, his wife had no idea where he was. After choking his son the previous night, Styx had fled in a panic. Desperate, he hid in the cabin of an abandoned ship. Without the nourishment from human flesh, his body had begun to show signs of decay. Soon, footsteps echoed above him, but to his relief, it was only his superior. With no other choice, Styx turned off the lights, pulled down his hat, and pretended to have caught a cold, using that as an excuse for his appearance. He feared that his corpse-like face would be discovered. Fortunately, his superior didn't ask many questions, only apologizing and showing him a video. In the footage, the masked man was seen placing the human sculpture at the desk and just before leaving, deliberately looking at the camera, as if waiting for the moment he would be discovered. Finally, Styx had proof that he hadn't been lying. His superior then decided that Styx should personally lead the investigation into the case. As expected, the doctor felt a surge of satisfaction as he watched the news reports. He replayed the surveillance footage of the man he had long observed before his death, knowing that the sculpture was indeed the same man he had preserved in formaldehyde. Afterward, the doctor visited his mother's grave, standing before her photo and whispering that the time had finally come and the world would discover his masterpiece. It was clear that he had been waiting for this moment, driven by an obsession to turn those who lived unnoticed into works of art, displaying them for all to see. Shortly after, another human sculpture was found. It's the elderly woman the doctor had kidnapped earlier. It turns out the doctor's dark motives were rooted in his childhood trauma. He had grown up with his mother, struggling to survive in the lowest rungs of society, as if they were forgotten by the world. After her death, the doctor, with no help or support, clawed his way out of obscurity, eventually becoming a successful doctor. He believed it was his duty to take responsibility for those who were forgotten, but what he failed to realize was that his warped vision had turned him into a murderer. Now the doctor had another task ahead of him. The boy he had tricked into coming home would become his first deliberately created mutant. He injected the virus into the boy's body, and all that remained was to wait. However, his wife soon grew suspicious. She couldn't understand why the boy had left without saying goodbye. The doctor lied, suggesting the boy might have felt uncomfortable in such a new environment. But when he got up, his wife looked at him with an inexplicable fear in her eyes. Not long after, Styx called the doctor, asking if there had been any progress with the research or if there was something that could suppress his episodes, as he felt like his consciousness was slipping away, but there was no breakthrough. While on the phone, Styx spotted a bottle of foundation. Looking at himself in the mirror, he hastily smeared it across his face, successfully covering the ghastly corpse-like spots on his skin. The next moment, Styx hurried to the morgue. After the coroner left, he opened one of the body lockers. This was the only idea he could think of to survive without crossing too many moral lines. But shortly after he left, the coroner noticed something strange. The corpse in the locker had been gnawed on, its flesh torn apart in a bloody mess. Feeling slightly better, Styx met up with Joe. Their investigation revealed that the victims were always isolated individuals, people with no connections, no family, and no one who would notice their disappearance. Clearly, the killer had chosen his targets with precision, likely viewing them as art. Later, Styx met with his wife to check on how badly he had hurt their son the night before. Fortunately, their son was physically unharmed, but his wife presented him with a hospital bill, the one from his initial checkup, and asked if he was sick. Styx didn't know what to say and only assured her that he was fine, though anyone looking at him could tell he wasn't. The more he tried to hide the truth, the angrier she became, finally demanding that Styx stay away from their son for good. During the heated argument, Styx suddenly felt ill. His stomach churned, and he rushed out of the house, running frantically toward the shore. Everything he had eaten from the corpse earlier spilled out, confirming that his body could only tolerate fresh nourishment. Meanwhile, the coroner had performed an autopsy on the human sculpture. The body had been dehydrated in a chemical bath, and every drop of liquid and fat had been replaced with a strange mixture to make the figure appear plump and lifelike. But what was the point of such a gruesome, meticulous process? When the coroner saw Styx, a chill ran through his spine all the way to his smelly butt. But he didn't mention the evidence of corpse consumption. Instead, he showed Styx the shirt from the sculpture. The label inside the collar read, "Still Life Number 5, confirming that the masked man truly saw his victims as art. It also meant that at least 4 others had already fallen victim to his twisted creation process. As the group was deep in discussion, the killer struck again, taunting them by hacking into the art gallery's system. The televisions began looping surveillance footage of the sculpture man before his death, showing him being watched. Meanwhile, the doctor couldn't sleep. He suspected his wife had discovered his secret. He asked her if she had been in his lab, but she didn't answer right away, because she had. Earlier that evening, while the doctor was at work, the suspicious wife had sneaked into the basement using a key she had taken. To her horror, she found the boy the doctor had claimed had left was actually tied up in the lab. As she approached, the boy suddenly woke up, terrifying her, who fled the basement in panic. When the doctor returned home, he noticed the key had been moved and rushed to check the basement, but found everything in order. He asked the boy if anyone had come down, but the boy didn't betray the doctor's wife, giving the doctor some relief. He then checked the boy's pulse, confused about why he hadn't yet transformed. It suddenly dawned on the doctor. No heartbeat was the prerequisite for the mutation. The next moment, the doctor strangled the boy to death. Yet the issue of the key still lingered in his mind, and he couldn't resist asking his wife about it. Swallowing hard, she lied, saying she hadn't been down there. The doctor finally breathed a sigh of relief. Elsewhere, Styx was in a panic. His daughter had followed the scent trail with their dog and managed to find him. Struggling to keep the beast inside him at bay, Styx screamed at her to leave immediately. His animalistic roar terrified the girl, and after a few seconds of hesitation, she turned and ran off, confused. But she hadn't gone far when a van suddenly pulled up, blocking her path. It turns out the despicable Gino had targeted Styx's daughter. Hours later, Styx's wife received a call from the school informing her that their daughter had never arrived. Panicking, she rushed to Styx's boat, only to be knocked unconscious as soon as she entered. When she woke up, she found herself handcuffed to a metal frame, in fear of being harassed by some ugly man. In the dim light, she saw Styx slowly rise from the shadows, bound by a heavy iron chain. The terrifying scene horrified her. She couldn't understand why her husband had become like this. Styx, now lucid, didn't offer any explanations at first. He simply unbuttoned his shirt to reveal not his handsome muscles, but the wound on his hairy chest. Then he told his wife the entire truth, but it was too incredible for her to accept. The wife was convinced he had made up this outrageous story to cover up some illness, and she angrily demanded to know where he had hidden their daughter. Fighting back his rage, Styx thrust his wrist toward her, urging her to feel his pulse. When she did, she was horrified to find that he had no pulse at all. His skin was cold, like a corpse. Speechless, she was left in shock when suddenly a noise came from above. Styx rushed to check and found Gino standing there, a smirk on his face. Gino mocked Styx, saying that instead of embracing his newfound strength, he had let his ridiculous conscience drag him down, leaving him in this miserable state. Then Gino pulled out his phone and showed Styx a picture of his kidnapped daughter. He threatened that a boat full of refugees would be arriving at the port that night, and Styx, as a police officer, needed to ensure the safety of his cargo. If not, his daughter would become the evening's meal. Styx collapsed in despair, overwhelmed and powerless. Little did he know, from that moment on, both he and Gino were about to be exposed. Afterward, a funeral home reported to the police that they had discovered a second half-eaten corpse inside a customer's coffin. This unfortunate soul had fallen victim to Gino, who often used this method to make bodies mysteriously disappear. It wasn't long before they identified the person who had delivered the body via security footage. It was one of Gino's henchmen. After calming down, Styx revealed the truth to his wife about their daughter's disappearance. He explained that before his transformation, he had been providing Gino with inside information. Gino always compensated him, but it wasn't out of greed. Styx had another secret weighing heavily on his conscience. Years ago, while chasing a fugitive, Styx fired his gun, but the bullet passed through the criminal and struck an innocent young girl. She fell into a coma and became a living vegetable, relying on expensive medical care to survive. Styx had been secretly supporting the girl and her mother ever since, and the mother, in a desperate attempt to make ends meet, had resorted to sex work. The wife was shocked to learn about the burden Styx had been carrying for years, and she finally understood why he had been so absent from their family life. She didn't know what to say. After they cleared the air, Styx unlocked her handcuffs and promised to bring their daughter back safely. Styx then hurried to a brothel and found Lena, the mother of the comatose girl. Gino would occasionally visit there, and Styx asked if she had any information about him, but Lena said she hadn't seen Gino for a long time. After Styx left, Lena anxiously returned to her room where she shockingly found Styx's daughter, indicating that Gino had hidden her there. As Styx walked down the street, he realized he was being followed by none other than one of Gino's henchmen. Try as he might, he couldn't shake the car tailing him, so he pulled over and walked down a dark bridge tunnel. When the henchman followed, Styx disappeared into the shadows. The henchman looked around, but before he knew it, Styx had silently appeared behind him. Grabbing the man, Styx demanded to know his daughter's whereabouts. But in an instant, hunger took control of him again. The henchman pulled out a gun, stopping Styx in his tracks. Regaining control, Styx wiped the blood from his mouth with dirty water dripping from the ceiling. The terrified henchman wasted no time rushing back to Gino's hideout. Gino, seeing the bite marks, immediately understood what had happened. But instead of helping the henchman as he begged for assistance, Gino pulled out his gun and shot him in the head. There could only be one of his kind in the world, since Gino wouldn't allow a rival to exist. With his hunger sated, Styx recovered some of his strength, but he had no choice but to comply with Gino's demands. A boatload of refugees was about to arrive, and Styx rushed to the docks with Joe to conduct a search. Not long after, a boatload of refugees disembarked. Joe, hearing something suspicious, moved forward quietly. But before he could react, Styx struck him from behind, knocking him out. When Joe eventually woke up, he witnessed Gino devouring the refugees. Joe shot at Gino, but it had no effect. Gino realized what was happening and lunged at Joe, who barely managed to escape by climbing to the top of a shipping container. From his vantage point, Joe overheard the conversation between Styx and Gino. Styx demanded to know where his daughter was, claiming he had done everything Gino had asked. But it was clear that Gino had no intention of keeping his promise. Rage overwhelmed Styx, and his body began to rapidly mutate. Just then, a large contingent of police arrived, forcing both men to flee in different directions. The next morning, Styx found the doctor, his only hope. The small bite of flesh from the previous night hadn't provided him with much nourishment. He asked the doctor if there was any cure, but the doctor seemed frustrated. The boy he had strangled hadn't revived, leaving him with no test subject. In a moment of desperation, the doctor bared his neck, telling him to bite him since it's the only way. Styx struggled, his instincts taking over, and he opened his mouth. But in the next second, he pushed the doctor away and fled. His human conscience wouldn't let him cross that line. However, the doctor's actions gave Styx an idea. He visited his blind father. Sensing something was wrong, his father smiled and said he wished he could see the blue sky and the sea once more. Styx, silent for a moment, then let his father feel his cold hand. He explained everything, how their daughter had been kidnapped, how he had become a living dead man. His father understood at once. Styx took his father out of the hospital. The next time they appeared on camera, Styx's father had offered himself as his son's nourishment. Moments later, after dying, his father came back to life, just like Styx. For the first time in many years, his father saw the sunset and the ocean. The two of them sat together until nightfall, his father greedily taking in one last look at the world before gently guiding Styx's hand, with the gun in it, to his head. Meanwhile, Gino was up to his tricks again. He called Lena, telling her to pack up Styx's daughter. Sensing danger in Gino's tone, Lena quickly dressed the girl and hid with her under the bed. Though it appeared Lena had joined forces with Gino, she had been acting under threat the entire time. Soon, footsteps approached the door. Styx's daughter wanted to run out and find her father, but just in time, Styx arrived. He immediately called the doctor. Gino, arriving at the brothel, sensed something was off the moment he walked in. Instead of a panicked scene, he was greeted by a calm doctor. Gino was shot down suddenly, becoming the doctor's new research subject. After all this, Styx, with tears in his eyes, stood outside his home. Lena had safely returned his daughter, and he had finally fulfilled his promise to his wife. But just then, Joe appeared behind him. The police had found Styx's father's body and now knew what he had become. In the next moment, both men were standing at the doctor's door. Joe demanded to know the truth, but before he could react, Styx knocked him out with a punch. When Joe awoke, he was tied up in the doctor's basement, with Gino locked up beside him. Styx, however, didn't intend to harm Joe. Instead, he took Joe's phone, turned on the recorder, and began confessing his crimes. He admitted to providing Gino with information in the past in exchange for money. Then he handed Joe a bag of cash, enough evidence to send Styx to prison. His only request was more time to find the masked killer who had caused his transformation. Styx then untied Joe. Seeing a glimpse of Styx's conscience, Joe nodded in agreement. As they left, Joe told Styx that they had found the first human sculpture made by the masked man, a lonely, elderly woman who had lived in the countryside. The doctor's face remained unreadable as he listened, but no one could have guessed that the woman was the key to Styx's transformation. The old woman had lived alone for years with only an ostrich as her companion. One day, the ostrich had gone mad, infected by some virus. Unable to part with her beloved pet, the woman didn't put it down immediately, but locked it in a room instead. When she was feeding it one day, the ostrich pecked her hand, leaving a wound. Seeing the injury, the woman finally made the painful decision to shoot the bird. But just minutes later, the doctor appeared behind her, selecting her as the first subject of his experiment. When the doctor submerged her in the large tank, a reaction occurred between the virus in her body and the chemicals in the tank, mutating the virus. The liquid seeped through cracks in the pipes, and by coincidence, the doctor dropped a bullet on the floor, which he casually picked up and placed back in his gun. Later, when Styx witnessed the doctor's murder, the masked doctor shot him with that same bullet right in the chest, setting off the chain of events that had led to Styx's current condition. Before parting, the doctor reassured Joe that he would quickly find a cure, though it was clear he was only interested in isolating the extraordinary virus. The samples he had taken from Styx hadn't triggered the boy's mutation, meaning the virus wasn't usable for his experiments. However, the doctor discovered that Gino and Styx shared the same mutation, leading him to realize further research would yield no new results. In a desperate move, the doctor stretched his hormone-let-go arm toward Gino, inviting him to bite. But Gino, wanting to be the sole god in this new world, refused to grant the doctor that opportunity. Their conversation soon took an unexpected turn. The doctor, carefully prodding, got Gino to reveal the secret of his transformation. Gino suggested the doctor inject himself with the isolated virus and then strangle himself with a rope. He said sometimes it only takes a few minutes, sometimes 2 or 3 days, but once he comes back, he'll be like him. In that instant, the doctor realized his earlier experiment on the boy hadn't failed. He had simply turned the boy into a sculpture too soon, without waiting for the transformation to occur. With this revelation, the doctor rushed out the door, carrying the original virus sample. But when he returned home, he found the cage open, Gino gone, and his wife lying on the floor, half-eaten. It turned out that shortly after the doctor left, his wife had sneaked into the basement, thinking that Gino was another innocent victim her husband had kidnapped for his grotesque experiments. So she unlocked the cage, only to become Gino's next meal. At that moment, Gino appeared behind the doctor, tossing the vial of virus into his mouth before lunging at the doctor. The doctor, panicking, pulled out his gun, causing Gino to flee since he wasn't wearing his helmet at that moment. Shortly after, Styx arrived. The sight of his wife's death filled the doctor with both grief and rage, and a darker plan began to form in his mind. He took another sample from Styx, promising to find a cure this time. The day passed quietly. That evening, Lena received a call from Gino, but to her horror, it was her daughter's voice on the line. Panic gripped her because her daughter, who was supposed to be paralyzed, was somehow speaking. Gino demanded Lena bring Styx to meet him, with no one else involved. The next morning, they arrived at the port as instructed, only to find that the warehouse was Gino's lair, where he kept his prey. Inside a cage, Lena's daughter was furiously gnawing on a man's smelly part. Lena and Styx rushed in, realizing too late that it was a trap. Gino locked them inside with the now mutated daughter, knowing exactly what would happen. Within seconds, Lena's daughter lunged at her mother, but Styx managed to grab her just in time. At that moment, a team of police officers kicked down the door. Styx had been wise enough not to come alone. Gino panicked and tried to escape through the roof, but there was nowhere left to run. Under heavy fire, Gino fell to the ground, his helmet knocked off. Still, he tried to get up, making a desperate dash for the river. But just as he was about to dive into the water, Joe fired a shot, hitting him square in the head, and with that, the reign of terror came to an end. A few minutes later, the doctor's door was knocked on. Styx had brought Lena's daughter, hoping for a cure. The doctor claimed he was still in the experimental phase, but Styx, growing impatient, threatened him. Cornered, the doctor reluctantly agreed to retrieve the supposed cure. However, there was no cure, only the virus the doctor had isolated from Styx's latest sample. The doctor began recording his findings. As the others waited anxiously, the doctor returned, now wearing a mask. Several gunshots rang out, and the doctor collapsed to the ground. Styx, lifting the mask, was momentarily stunned when he saw the killer's face, completely missing the sinister smile that lingered on the doctor's lips. Lena approached and asked if there is no cure. Defeated, Styx shook his head. Despair filled Lena as she walked toward her daughter. 2 gunshots echoed in the air, ending the endless darkness for both mother and daughter. 2 days later, Styx arranged to meet Joe in a desolate wilderness. Since there was no cure, Styx was determined not to remain a threat to others. He asked Joe to oversee his end. As Joe raised his gun, a loud knocking sound came from inside a morgue drawer. The coroner, summoning his courage, opened it, only to find the doctor inside, eyes wide open. He had also completed his transformation. The coroner, excited by the sight of this new being, stared in awe. At that very moment, Styx's latent powers suddenly awakened. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.